So let's continue. In the previous video, we looked at steps 11 to 20. Now let's continue with steps 21 to 30. All right. So the goal now is to make the div not take up the entire width of the page. The CSS width property is perfect for this. Create a new type selector in the style sheet that gives your div element a width of 300 pixels. Okay, so if you remember in the previous video, we added a div element. So this is the div element, and this div element contains all of our other elements, right? So the h1, the p tag, and the h2, everything is now in the div element. So what we want to do is we want to give this div element, so we just say div like so, and we want to give it a width. So in CSS we have a width property, and we want to give the width a value of 300 pixels. Okay, all right, so yeah, in your style sheet, comment out the line containing the background color property and value, so you can see the effect of only styling the div element. This will make the background white again. All right, so the way you can comment or add comments is to use this // and then hash star, and then also star and then /. Okay, so this makes the code inactive. Okay, adding this comment to it make the code inactive. Okay, that's why, as you can see, the background is no longer there. Now use the existing div selector to add a background color to the div to be Bollywood. Okay, so we'll say div. So this is our div element. We want to add a background color to it. So background color, and we'll give it Bollywood. Okay, so now as you can see, the div has the background of Bollywood, and you can see the background only covers this little portion of the screen. That is 300 pixels. So that's the width of the div that we've given it, 300 pixels. Okay, so that's the size of the div element. All right. Okay, now it's easy to see that the text is centered inside the div element. Currently, the width of the div element is specified in pixels. Change its width property value to 80% to make it 80% of its parent width. All right, so as you can see, before our text was centered somewhere here, but now it looks like our text has shifted to the left a bit, which is true, but our text is still centered. As you can see, inside the div is centered. So our text is centered, but not centered relative to the body element, but rather relative to the div element. Okay, yeah. But what we want to do is we want to change the width, this one here, from 300 pixels to 80%. So in CSS you can use measurement units like pixels. You can also use percentage. We also have what we call rem and em. We'll get to that later on in the tutorials. So we'll just say 80%. All right, now what is happening is that this div, let's go to the HTML. Okay, so this div, as you can see, is a child of the body element. In other words, it is nested within the body element. Okay, so if we give it a width of 80%, what it is doing is that it is taking 80% of the body's width. So from here to here is the entire width of the body, right? But when you give it 80%, then the div takes 80% of it. That's why when we scroll to the left, you see that the width of the body keeps increasing. In the same way, the width of the div with the background also keeps increasing. And when we scroll to the right, it keeps decreasing as well. Okay? All right, so that's the way it works. Okay, now you want to center the div horizontally. You can do this by setting its margins left and margin right, property to auto. Think of the margin as invisible space around an element. Using these two margin properties, center the div element within the body element. Okay, so as you can see, our div, which has this background, is taking 80% of the body's property, of the body's width, sorry. But then it is not centered. As you can see, it's tilted to the left. So the way we want to center it is by doing margin right, which is also a property, a CSS property, and we give it a value of auto. And we also say margin left, and we give it a property of auto as well. Okay, now as you can see, our div is centered nicely on our page. So even if we expand it, it's still centered and it keeps growing larger or smaller depending on where we slide it. All right, let's continue. So far, you've been using the type selectors to style elements. A class selector is defined by a name with a dot directly in front of it, like this. Okay, so far for all of our styles, as you can see, we've been using type selectors. So for example, we select body, we've selected H1, H2, P, we've also selected div. So these are all type selectors, okay? But now we want to learn about something called class selected. So a class selector, the way you write a class selector is by using the dot notation, right? Or period. So like so dot, and then the class name, and then you bring your curly braces and then the styles. So it's just the same thing as we've been doing, but instead of writing the name of the element directly, you write the name of the class. Okay, so a class is sort of a way to identify an element. We'll learn more about it as we go forward, but for now, what we are going to do is change the existing div selector into a class selector by replacing div with a class named menu. Okay, now classes are important because, for example, you can have multiple div elements in your file. So the classes will help you to identify which of the divs you want to apply a particular styles to. So for example, let's say you have 10 divs in your styles, in your file, in your HTML. And out of these 10 divs, you want 5 of them to be colored red and another 5 to be colored blue. So using a class, you can tell your browser that, okay, with all the div that has the class of red, color them red. And with all the div that has a class of blue, color them blue. So that's why divs are that's why classes are very important. So like I said, we'll be learning more about it as we progress. So the class name we are giving this div is menu. Okay, now once I wrote dot menu, you can see all the style that we have. The background is gone. Okay, now let's continue. We'll fix it very shortly. Okay, to apply the class's styling to the div element, add a class attribute to the div element opening tag and set its value to menu. Okay, so in our CSS, as you can see, we have .menu with all of these styles added to them. But in our HTML, we don't have anything like menu. We don't have any class called menu. So all of these styles is not being applied. Okay, so the way we can apply these styles to the div is by coming here and adding an attribute. The name of the attribute is class, and the value we are going to use menu. Okay, now once we do that, you see the styles is activated again. Okay, so here we have a class, and the class has an attribute of menu. And when we come to the styles.css, to reference this menu, we just say dot, and then we write menu. Okay, which means that it tells the browser that, hey, go into the HTML file, and when you go there, any attribute that has a class with a value of menu, apply all of these styles to it. Okay, yeah, so that's what we are doing now. All right, on to the next one. Since the cafe's main product is for sale is coffee, you could use an image of coffee beans for the background of the page. Delete the comment and its content inside the body type selector. Now add a background image property and set its value to this URL here. All right, so once again, just to remind ourselves, this is what we are building. Okay, now we are at the stage where we want to add the background image of this coffee beans. So that's what we are coming to do next. Okay, so first let me delete this comment we have here. And then the way we are going to add the background image is to use the background image property, and the value is going to be this URL here. So the way you do that is just write URL, okay, and then you put the URL you want to use inside this bracket here. Okay, all right, so I'll just copy URL, copy, and then paste it. All right, so now as you can see, we have our background image of these coffee beans right here. Okay, it's looking good. Time to start adding some menu items. Add an empty article element under the coffee heading. It will contain a flavor and price of each coffee you currently offer. All right, so yeah, the article element is just also a way to separate the various elements on the web page. All right, so we want to add an article element. In that article element, you are going to add these various coffees and their corresponding prices. Okay, so we need an opening article element, a closing article element, and yeah, on to the next one. Okay, so article element commonly contain multiple elements that have related information. In this case, it will contain a coffee flavor and a price for that flavor. Next two P elements inside your article element. The first one's text should be French vanilla, and the second one's text should be 3.00. All right, so we need our first P element like so. I'll just copy and paste it, and then I'll say French vanilla, and then I will also say 3.00. okay. All right, so that is going to be it for this video. I'll continue in the next one with steps 31 to step 40. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.